The gate is burning orange in the torchlight, and someone is screaming for the key. It is the evening of July 14th, 1789, and a mob has just breached the walls of a fortress that has terrified Paris for 400 years. Stone dust hangs in the air like fog. Somewhere inside, an iron key over a foot long, cold, heavy, older than anyone alive, is being wrenched from a lock that has not been opened by force and living memory. Within months, that very key will leave France forever, sent as a gift across an ocean. And the man who should have understood locks and keys better than almost anyone else in Europe, a king, in fact, who spent his private hours not on thrones or wars, but hunched over a workbench filing metal, will not be inside that fortress at all. He will be locked in a very different kind of room, and it is a key, in the end, that helps seal his fate. To understand how we got to that burning gate, we have to go back much further than 3 days. We have to go back nearly 4,000 years, to a warm, dry palace where someone first decided that a door needed a secret. Historians and archaeologists often point to ancient Egypt as home to one of the earliest true lock-and-key mechanisms ever recovered, though some credit ancient Mesopotamia with equally old examples. A wooden pin tumbler device, its teeth worn smooth by hands that have been dust for millennia. The design was almost embarrassingly simple, a bolt with holes drilled into it, pins that dropped into those holes under gravity, and a wooden key with matching pegs that lifted the pins just high enough to slide the bolt free. Nothing mechanical, nothing clever, by our standards. And yet it worked so well that the same basic principle, pins, a bolt, a matching key, is still sitting inside your front door lock today. The lock itself was massive, sometimes over 2 feet long, mounted openly on doors rather than hidden inside them. You needed both hands and a bit of shoulder strength just to work it. Records from the region show these locks protected temple storerooms and official archives, places where grain, oil, or documents needed to survive not just thieves but time itself. But here is the detail that tends to surprise people. The earliest keys were not really about secrecy. In a world where most people could not read and most homes had nothing worth stealing, a lock was less a security system and more a kind of formal seal, a way of saying out loud in iron and wood that something inside mattered. The key was the proof that you were the person allowed to matter to it. That idea, the key as proof of belonging, not just as a tool against thieves, is the thread that runs through everything that follows. And it is about to escalate. The first real turning point comes with Rome. Roman keys shrink dramatically in size, and something strange happens to them. They start showing up as jewelry. Archaeologists have recovered bronze and iron finger rings from Roman sites with a small key literally forged onto the band, meant to be worn constantly, day and night, on the hand. Why would you wear your key instead of just carrying it? Because in a Roman household, the person who held the key to the storeroom, where the spices, oils, wine, and valuables were kept, held real domestic power. Pepper alone was, by some accounts, prized nearly as highly as coin itself. A key ring worn on the finger was a quiet, constant announcement, I am the one trusted with what is valuable here. Losing it wasn't just inconvenient, it was, socially, almost a small humiliation. You can hear the shift if you imagine the sound, not the deep clunk of an Egyptian wooden bolt being hauled open with both hands, but the thin, high clink of a small bronze key twisting in a tight iron mechanism, worn smooth against skin, warmed by a body all day before it ever touched metal. By the time we reach medieval Europe, keys have grown ornate, symbolic, almost theatrical. Cities began handing ceremonial keys to honored visitors, the origin of the phrase, the key to the city, that mayors still use today, only now it is usually an oversized novelty prop for a ribbon cutting, not an actual functioning key to an actual functioning gate. In the medieval version, it was real. A city key could, in genuine emergencies, open genuine gates. Handing someone that key meant handing them your walls. And it is somewhere in the same stretch of history that keys pick up their darkest folklore, the tales of chastity devices supposedly locked with cruel iron keys by jealous medieval husbands heading off to war. Legend has it these devices were common practice, but it is worth saying clearly, historians largely regard these as later legend, likely exaggerated or invented in the 18th and 19th centuries, rather than genuine medieval practice, with almost no verified surviving medieval examples to support the myth as popularly told. It's a great story. It is very likely not a true one, at least not in the form most people have heard it. What is true, and far stranger in its own quiet way, is what happens next, inside the workshop of a king. By the 1780s in France, lockmaking had become something close to an art form and an obsession among European nobility, a hobby considered acceptably manly, and mechanical for a gentleman unlike, say, needlework. And one particular young monarch took to it with unusual, genuine devotion. Louis XVI, King of France, kept a private forge and workshop, first at Versailles and later moved with him to the Tuileries Palace, where, according to well-documented court accounts, he spent long hours under the instruction of a professional locksmith named François Gemain, learning to cut, file, and fit metal into working locks with his own hands. Picture it, candlelight flickering off iron filings scattered across a workbench. the rasping scrape of a file against steel, the particular oily smell of metal shavings and tallow, and a king, dressed, presumably, rather more plainly than his portrait suggest, squinting at a half-finished lock mechanism like any tradesman would. Courtiers reportedly found the hobby faintly ridiculous for a monarch. History would find it a great deal more than ridiculous. Because here is where the open loop from the very beginning of this story finally starts to close, and where everything you think you understand about it is about to turn inside out. The lock the king was best known for was not one he built for a palace door, it was one he helped design and conceal inside his own home. A hidden iron cabinet built into a wall of the Tuileries Palace, its very existence known to almost no one, secured by a lock unusually sophisticated for its time. Inside it, the king kept his most sensitive personal papers, private correspondence, financial records, letters touching on matters he very much did not want made public during a revolution that was rapidly turning against him. He trusted almost no one with the secret of that cabinet. Almost no one, except the same locksmith who had taught him, Francois Gamain, who had helped install the mechanism and therefore knew exactly where it was hidden and how it worked. This is the twist, and it is not a dramatic embellishment. It is recorded history. In November of 1792, with the king already stripped of his throne and the revolutionary government searching for evidence to use against him, Gamain went to the authorities. He led officials, including the Minister of the Interior, directly to the hidden cabinet in the wall, what history now calls the armoire de fer, the iron cabinet, and showed them exactly how to open the lock the king himself had helped build. Think about the shape of that irony for a moment. A king who devoted hundreds of private hours to mastering the art of keeping things locked away had built, with his own trained hands, the very lock that would be turned against him. The papers found inside that cabinet, correspondence suggesting secret dealings, financial arrangements, communications that damaged his position further, were entered as evidence at his trial. Louis XVI was convicted and executed by guillotine in January of 1793. Historians still debate exactly how decisive those particular documents were to the final verdict, since the political tide against him was already overwhelming by that point. But they were undeniably presented, undeniably damaging, and undeniably made possible by a lock. The king himself understood better than almost anyone in France. The hobby meant to give him mastery over small, controllable metal worlds had instead given someone else the map to his most private one. And that fortress from the opening scene, the Bastille, falls into this same current. When it was stormed in July of 1789, months before the discovery of the iron cabinet, its massive original key was seized as a trophy of the new order, proof that the old, locked world of absolute monarchy could, in fact, be broken open. The following year, in 1790, the Marquis de Lafayette, who had fought alongside American forces and considered George Washington something between a mentor and a friend, sent that very key across the Atlantic as a gift, a physical symbol that the revolutionary spirit of one nation had reached another. Washington received it at Mount Vernon, where, according to the estate's own historical records, that same key is still displayed today, hanging in the front passage of his home more than 2 centuries later. If you visit Mount Vernon now, you can stand a few feet from the actual iron key that once secured one of history's most feared prisons. So already, from just this one object, we have 2 full lives happening in parallel. The key as ancient household tool, quietly enabling ordinary domestic trust for thousands of years, and the key as political thunderclap, capable of toppling absolute power or immortalizing a revolution in a glass case in Virginia. But there is one more escalation still to come, and it belongs not to kings, but to locksmiths themselves, a rivalry that turned lockmaking into something closer to a public blood sport. In 1784, an English inventor named Joseph Bramah patented a lock of extraordinary complexity for its era, and he did something bold with it. He displayed it in his shop window in London with a public challenge attached, offering 200 guineas, a genuinely enormous sum at the time, to anyone who could pick it open without a key. The lock sat in that window, according to accounts of the period, for decades, unbeaten, a kind of standing dare to the entire world. It took until 1851, at the Great Exhibition in London, the same grand event that showcased the Crystal Palace and the industrial pride of an empire, for an American locksmith named Alfred Charles Hobbs to finally take up the challenge in person. Working publicly, in front of witnesses, Hobbs reportedly spent 51 hours spread across 16 days methodically working the lock's internal mechanism, before finally, audibly, clicking it open. The sound of that final click, after so many days of quiet, patient failure, apparently drew genuine crowds and genuine astonishment. It was treated less like a technical curiosity and more like watching someone finally win a decades-long duel. The reason that story matters is not just the drama of it, it's what it reveals about keys and locks as a species of ongoing warfare, an arms race that has never really stopped. Every new lock design throughout history has been, in effect, a challenge thrown down to future thieves and future locksmiths alike, and every clever new key has eventually met its clever counter-technique. That tension, between the maker of the lock and the breaker of the lock, is arguably the real engine driving the entire history of this small object, far more than any single king or fortress. So why does any of this matter to you now, tonight, scrolling on a phone or driving home or lying in the dark listening to this? because you are, right now, almost certainly surrounded by descendants of this exact ancient argument. The key fob in your pocket that unlocks your car with a silent radio signal is still, underneath its electronics, running the same basic logic as that Egyptian wooden pin tumbler 4,000 years old, a unique shape that only one specific mechanism will accept. The key card you tap against a hotel room door is a direct descendant of the city key handed to an honored guest, a small object that says, "For a limited and revocable time, you are trusted here." Even the password you type into your phone is, conceptually, a key with no metal left in it at all, proof of belonging translated finally into pure information. We have spent 4,000 years making the key smaller, quieter, and more abstract, but we have never once stopped needing the same basic promise it was originally built to make. This space is not for just anyone, it's for you, specifically, and here is the proof. If there is a single thread worth carrying out of all of this, it is probably this one, that the key has almost never really been about the lock at all. It has been about trust, made physical. A wooden peg in ancient Egypt saying, "This granary belongs to someone." A bronze ring on a Roman finger saying, "This household trusts me with what matters." A king's private workshop, tragically, saying, "I can build the very thing that will one day be used to unlock my own downfall." And an iron gate key, once feared, now resting quietly under glass in Virginia, saying, "This revolution really happened, and here is proof you can still touch." The lock changes, the metal changes, the size shrinks from a plank you needed both arms to lift, down to a sliver of plastic and silicon you barely notice in your pocket. But the question a key has always asked has never changed at all. It simply asks quietly, every single time, whether you are the one who is meant to be let in. So the next time you feel for your keys before leaving the house, or tap a glowing card against a hotel door, or type in a passcode without even thinking about it, it might be worth pausing on that motion for just 1 second. What exactly are you proving in that instant, and to whom? And if a king who literally built locks with his own hands could still be undone by the one he trusted least wisely, what does that suggest about the locks, real or otherwise, that any of us build around the things we most want to protect? Main sources for this story include the historical collections and public records of Mount Vernon regarding the Bastille key gifted by the Marquis de Lafayette to George Washington, documented French Revolutionary-era accounts of the Armoire de Fer and the testimony of locksmith François Gamin, and period accounts of the 1851 Great Exhibition detailing Alfred Charles Hobbs's defeat of the Bramah lock. The full list is in the description.